Zechariah Chapter 11. Open your doors, O Lebanon, that the fire may devour your cedars. Howl, O fir tree, for the cedar has fallen, because the majestic trees are devastated. Howl, O oaks of Bashan, for the impenetrable forest is brought down. The sound of the howling of shepherds. For their majesty is devastated. The sound of the roaring of young lions. For the pride of Jordan is devastated. Thus says Jehovah my God, shepherd the flock of slaughter. Whose owners slaughter them and are not punished, and they who sell them say, Blessed be Jehovah, for I am rich, and their own shepherds do not spare them. For I will no longer spare the inhabitants of the land, declares Jehovah, but I am about to cause each man to fall into his neighbor's hand and into the hand of his king, and they will strike the land, and I will not deliver them from their hand. So I shepherded the flock of slaughter, and thereby the afflicted of the flock. And I took to myself 2 staffs, one I called favor, and the other I called bonds, and I shepherded the flock. Then I destroyed the 3 shepherds in 1 month, for my soul was impatient with them, and their soul also detested me. Then I said, I will not shepherd you. What is to die will die, and what is to be destroyed will be destroyed, and those who are left will each eat one another's flesh. And I took my staff, favor, and I broke it in pieces so as to break my covenant which I had made with all the peoples. And it was broken in that day, and thus the afflicted of the flock, who watched me, knew that it was the word of Jehovah. And I said to them, If it is good in your sight, give me my wages, but if not, do not bother. So they weighed out my wages, 30 pieces of silver. And Jehovah said to me, Throw it to the potter, that magnificent price that I am priced with by them. So I took the 30 pieces of silver and threw them to the potter, into the house of Jehovah. Then I broke my second staff, bonds, in pieces, so as to break the brotherhood between Judah and Israel. And Jehovah said to me, Again, take the equipment of a foolish shepherd. For I am about to raise up a shepherd in the land who will not visit those who are perishing, nor seek the scattered, nor heal what is broken, nor sustain what stands, but will devour the flesh of the fat ones and tear off their hooves. Woe to the worthless shepherd, who abandons the flock. The sword will fall on his arm and on his right eye. His arm will be utterly withered, and his right eye will be totally darkened. Zechariah Chapter 12. The burden of the word of Jehovah concerning Israel. Thus declares Jehovah, who stretches forth the heavens and lays the foundations of the earth and forms the spirit of man within him. I am about to make Jerusalem a cup of reeling to all the surrounding peoples, and when what happens in siege is upon Jerusalem, it will be upon Judah as well. And in that day I will make Jerusalem a burdensome stone to all the peoples, all who burden themselves with her will be cut up. Indeed, all the nations of the earth will be gathered against her. In that day, declares Jehovah, I will strike every horse with bewilderment and its rider with madness, and I will open my eyes upon the house of Judah and will strike every horse of the peoples with blindness. Then the leaders of Judah will say in their heart, The inhabitants of Jerusalem, by Jehovah of hosts their God, are my strength. In that day I will make the leaders of Judah like a fire pot on wood and like a torch of fire among sheaves, and they will consume all the surrounding peoples on the right and on the left. And Jerusalem will dwell again in her own place, in Jerusalem. And Jehovah will save the tents of Judah first, so that the beauty of the house of David and the beauty of the inhabitants of Jerusalem may not be magnified above Judah. In that day Jehovah will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and he who is feeble among them in that day will be like David, and the house of David will be like God, like the angel of Jehovah before them. And in that day I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. And I will pour out on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplications, and they will look upon me, whom they have pierced, and they will wail over him with wailing as for an only son and cry bitterly over him with bitter crying as for a firstborn son. In that day there will be great wailing in Jerusalem, like the wailing of Hadad-rimmon in the valley of Megiddon. And the land will wail, every family by itself, the family of the house of David by itself, and their wives by themselves, the family of the house of Nathan by itself, and their wives by themselves. The family of the house of Levi by itself, and their wives by themselves, the family of the Shimites by itself, and their wives by themselves. All the families that remain, every family by itself, and their wives by themselves. Zechariah Chapter 13. In that day there will be an open fountain for the house of David and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for impurity. And in that day, declares Jehovah of hosts, I will cut off the names of the idols from the land, and they will no longer be remembered, and I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to pass from the land. And if anyone still prophesies, his father and mother, who begot him, will say to him, You shall not live, for you have spoken falsely in the name of Jehovah, and his father and mother, who begot him, will pierce him through when he prophesies. And in that day the prophets will each be ashamed of his vision when he prophesies, and they will not wear a hairy garment in order to deceive. But he will say, I am no prophet, I am a tiller of the ground, for a man sold me in my youth. And someone will say to him, What are these wounds between your arms? And he will say, Those with which I was wounded in the house of those who love me. Awake, O sword, against my shepherd, and against the man who is my fellow, declares Jehovah of hosts. Strike the shepherd, that the sheep may be scattered, and I will turn my hand upon the little ones. And in all the land, declares Jehovah, 2 parts in it will be cut off and will die, but the 3rd part will be left in it. And I will bring the 3rd part through fire and refine them as silver is refined and try them as gold is tried. They will call on my name, and I will answer them, I will say, They are my people, and they will say, Jehovah is my God. Zechariah Chapter 14. Indeed a day is coming for Jehovah when the spoil taken from you will be divided among you. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be captured, and the houses plundered, and the women ravished, and half of the city will go forth into captivity, but the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then Jehovah will go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fights in a day of battle. And his feet will stand in that day on the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split at its middle toward the east and toward the west into a very great valley, so that half of the mountain will remove to the north and half of it to the south. And you will flee into the valley of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains will reach unto Azel, yes, you will flee, just as you fled before the earthquake in the days of Uzziah the king of Judah. And Jehovah my God will come, and all the saints with him. And in that day there will be no light, the shining ones will withdraw. For it will be a kind of day known only to Jehovah, neither day or night, but at evening time there will be light. And in that day living waters will go forth from Jerusalem, half of them toward the eastern sea and half of them toward the western sea, it will be there in summer and in winter. And Jehovah will be king over all the earth, and in that day Jehovah will be the one God and his name the one name. All the land will be changed into a plain from Geba to Rimmon south of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem will be raised and will dwell in her place, from Benjamin's gate to the place of the first gate to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the king's winepresses. And people will dwell in her, and there will be no more curse, for Jerusalem will dwell securely. And this will be the plague with which Jehovah will strike all the peoples who have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot while they are standing on their feet, and their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongue will rot in their mouth. And in that day a great panic from Jehovah will be among them, and each will seize his neighbor's hand, and his hand will rise up against his neighbor's hand. And Judah will also fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations will be gathered together, gold and silver and garments, in great abundance. And as this plague is, so will the plague be on the horse, the mule, the camel, the donkey, and all the cattle that are in those camps. And everyone left from all the nations that went forth against Jerusalem will go up from year to worship the King, Jehovah of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And whichever of the families of the earth does not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, Jehovah of hosts, upon them there will be no rain. And if the family of Egypt does not go up and enter, there will be no rain upon them. There will be the plague with which Jehovah strikes the nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This will be the sin of Egypt and the sin of all the nations that do not go up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. In that day on the horses' bells will be, Holiness to Jehovah, and the pots in the house of Jehovah will be like the basins before the altar. Indeed every pot in Jerusalem and in Judah will be holiness to Jehovah of hosts, and all those who sacrifice will come and take of them and boil in them, and there will never again be a Canaanite in the house of Jehovah of hosts in that day.